The bond between a parent and child is supposed to be lifelong and unconditional. For many, it is. There are parents who struggle to make sure their kids have the best, parents that overdose their children on love and attention, parents who will protect their children at all costs, whether they are putting themselves in harm's way to shield them or going full mama bear to deter those who wish them harm. But what if parents didn't have the capacity for any of this? This is unfortunately the case with many in families today. Children are born into families with mental health issues, anger issues, addiction, or criminal activity, etc. Regardless of why they cannot provide a safe, loving environment to their children, the children are the only ones who suffer. This was the case for Emani Moss from the very beginning of her life. She was never able to feel love and comfort from her parents. Her mother was an addict and gave Emani and her 5 siblings up shortly after she was born in 2003. Emani was given to her biological father, Eman Moss, who was convicted in 2004 of battery and child cruelty after beating Emani's mother in front of her. Despite this, he was able to maintain custody of Emani. And it does seem like things were going okay for her being with her dad. He had family that they saw regularly and would help him with her care. They attended church where Eman met a preschool teacher named Tiffany Brown. And in 2009, Eman married Tiffany and they had 2 children together, a girl and a boy. In March of 2010, when Emani was 6 years old, she went to see the school nurse. But she didn't go because she wasn't feeling well, more that she needed someone to talk to. She told the school nurse that she was scared to go home because she received a bad report card and her stepmom was mean to her. Trying to talk to Emani and get her through this while providing comfort and support, the school nurse quickly realized that Emani was not just a kid that was over-exaggerating the situation. She meant that she would literally get hurt. Emani's stepmom had been beating her and she had marks all over her body to prove it. She told the school nurse her stepmother would beat her with a curtain rod, and upon further inspection, the nurse found wounds on Emani in various places and in various stages of healing, indicating that this was not a one-time occurrence. Emani was taken to the police station and charges were filed against Tiffany Moss. But instead of this teaching her a lesson or getting her to stop the abuse, this fueled her anger towards Emani. Tiffany admitted to hitting Emani one time when she didn't do her homework. She said that she hit her 3 times, but just that once. But Emani had scabs, bruises, and welts on her arms, shoulders, back, chest, and her legs, indicating ongoing repeated abuse. Tiffany became resentful towards Emani because she was arrested and had to plead guilty to get the Georgia's first-time offender deal. Even though she only received 5 years probation and no jail time, Tiffany was unable to keep her job as a preschool teacher and blamed all of this on Emani. Thankfully, she was removed from the care of her father and stepmother by the Georgia Division of Family and Child Services. She went to live with her grandmother, Robin, and during this time, Emani was improving with her schoolwork and seemed to be flourishing. This miraculous turnaround was short-lived. Emani's dad fought Robin to regain custody of her, and in the fall of 2010, she was returned to her father and evil stepmother. After Tiffany had signed her plea deal, Eman and Tiffany completed a few parenting classes and all of the charges were dropped by Child Services. Robin would not give up and kept trying to regain custody of Emani, but she was never successful. Robin tried many times to tell authorities that Emani was in danger and being abused, and she wasn't wrong. The arrest and conviction of Tiffany Moss sparked a cycle of abuse once Emani was returned into their care. Emani tried to run away multiple times. Once she ran away to their apartment office and told the manager that her stepmother had tied her up with belts and put her in a cold shower. She ran away again and was found sleeping in the bushes near her home by a police officer, and even with Tiffany's prior charges of abuse, when Emani told the police that she ran away because she was being abused by her stepmom, Tiffany just told them that it was not true and nothing was done. After all, she took a court-ordered parenting class, so she must be a changed person. Between 2011 and 2013, the Moss family bounced around, sometimes staying with family. However, when they were not staying with their family, they would rarely see them. Other members of Eman's family also called child services multiple times for various reasons. One occasion was after a visit with Eman's sister on Mother's Day of 2013. She noticed that Emani had short, chopped-looking hair, and when she commented, Tiffany replied, "If you act ugly, you should look ugly." Another report claimed that Emani was being neglected and looked thin, but child services never did any follow-up or any visits to the Moss home. At the end of the summer in 2013, the Moss family found an apartment and announced that they would be pulling Emani from public school and homeschooling her. This meant Emani would never get any breaks or relief from her abuser, and she would no longer be in the presence of mandatory reporters. This is where things took a turn from bad to worse. Due to Eman's work schedule, he was rarely home. He left early in the morning and came home late at night. And on October 24th of 2013, Emani had what her father believed to be a seizure. He came home to find his daughter unresponsive in the bathtub, shaking with her eyes rolling in her head. He took her and laid her in her bed, where she remained for a few days. When Eman was home, he would try to feed Emani, but she would no longer eat. On October 28th, 2013, 4 days after her seizure, Eman came home from work and everything seemed completely normal. The younger kids were playing in the living room and Tiffany was watching TV. Eman made his way to Emani's room to find her laying lifeless on a blanket on the floor. Now, Eman was not shocked by this because Tiffany had actually called him at work earlier that day and told him that Emani was dead. When he walked into his home, there was no sadness, no panic. There was just a typical Monday night by all accounts, except for his oldest daughter's corpse laying on her bedroom floor. Eman wanted to call the police, but Tiffany told him their other children would be taken if he did that. She told him they needed to think like criminals to assure that they didn't get their other kids taken away. Eman wrapped Emani's body up in blankets and moved her to a different room where he could go visit her and sit with her decomposing body every day after work. Other than the ritual of him sitting with Emani's body, they lived life like normal. Tiffany stayed home caring for her children, and Eman went to work. On Halloween, 3 days after Emani's death, they decided it was time to dispose of her body. They made a trip to the store to gather the supplies they would need. They picked up a trash can, bags, charcoal, and lighter fluid. They also picked up some new clothes for Emani, a comforter, and some bed sheets. When the Moss family got home, they proceeded to stuff Emani's little body into the trash bags, but she was in full rigor and her body was stiff and not easy to contort. Tiffany and Eman used duct tape to shape her body to the correct form to fit into the trash bags they bought. They dislocated and broke Emani's limbs during this process, and given her size at the time of her death, this would not have been difficult. At the time she passed away, Emani was 10 years old and only weighed 32 pounds, which is approximately the weight of 4 gallons of water or a toddler, not a 10-year-old girl. After Tiffany and Eman felt she was compressed enough, they wrapped her in a comforter, stuffed her body in a trash bag, and then put her into the trash barrel they had bought. The next day, on November 1st of 2013, the Mosses loaded the barrel containing Emani's body into their car along with their other children and drove around until they found what they believed to be the perfect secluded spot to burn her body. They finally found the perfect spot and threw some charcoal in the barrel, doused Emani with lighter fluid, and lit her on fire. As they watched her burn, they decided she wasn't burning like they thought she would, and they put the fire out. They loaded the barrel back into their car and drove home. The next day, Eman went to work with his daughter's decomposing, partially burned body in the back of his car. He couldn't stay quiet anymore, but he didn't call the police. He confided in a co-worker who urged him to do the right thing. Around 4 in the morning on November 3rd, 2013, Eman called 911 and told the police that he was suicidal. He then told Tiffany that he had called the police, and she took the barrel containing Emani's partially burnt body out of their family car and fled with her 2 children. When the police arrived, Eman told them that Emani had gotten into chemicals and drank them, causing her death, and he panicked, putting her into the trash can and tried to cremate her. Tiffany and Eman had reported Emani as a runaway before burning her body to try and cover their tracks as to why she was gone. Not that this was necessary, as their neighbors reported not even knowing that Emani existed. They saw Tiffany always with her 2 children and Eman sometimes, but once the Mosses moved into that apartment, Emani never left the house. The autopsy showed Emani as being extremely underweight, weighing only 32 pounds, and all of her organs were small. The authorities knew that Emani did not die how Eman had told them, and he was immediately arrested. He broke very easily and agreed to testify against Tiffany in court so he would not get the death penalty. He did, however, receive a sentence of life in prison for his actions, or more so his lack of actions, that contributed to his daughter's death. Tiffany had taken her children to her mother's house and then turned herself in. Tiffany's trial did not occur until April 15th of 2019, and she represented herself against the recommendation of the judge. She gave no opening or closing arguments, she asked no questions, she didn't cross-examine witnesses or experts, and on April 29th of 2019, Tiffany Nicole Moss was found guilty of various crimes, including murder, harm to a child, and concealing a death. The jury took only 2 hours to deliberate, as the evidence they had heard in that courtroom was appalling. The jury heard how Tiffany only abused Emani. She was not some mean, irate person who just wanted to beat her kids. It was just Emani. They heard how she never harmed her own children and how her children were well fed, well taken care of. They heard how she not only starved Emani to death, but towards the end, when Emani was too weak to even leave her bed, Tiffany bought cookies to bake for her children. So while Emani was starving to death in her room, Tiffany baked cookies that filled the entire home with the smell of delicious baking cookies that Emani could not have. The jury then listened to how painful and slow Emani's death was and how it took months for her to die. Then they listened to Eman tell them how he and Tiffany tried to cover up Emani's death by throwing her in a trash can and then lighting her on fire out in a field while their other children were present. On May 1st of 2019, Tiffany was sentenced to death plus 20 years. The judge did not waste any time in scheduling her execution and set a date for Tiffany to die by lethal injection between June 7th and the 14th of that year. Of course, this did not happen because Tiffany decided to file an appeal, with her attorney stating that she was not competent to act as her own legal counsel. There is no additional information on a new trial taking place. I did find another article stating that Tiffany was again set to be executed on January 12th of 2020, but that didn't happen either, and there's no record of her appeal being denied or granted. I did check the Arendelle State Prison inmate records, which state that Tiffany is still actively being held with a release date of death. Emani's grandmother Robin, who tried to regain custody of her, could not let this go, and being completely appalled that no one listened to her and the other family members, decided to sue Child Services for their complete disregard for Emani's life. There were so many people who loved and cared for her and would have taken great care of her, but Child Services took Emani from those loving people and placed her back in the care of her father, who let her die, and her stepmother, who killed her. Let's face it, you don't accidentally starve someone to death. Her dad could have intervened at any time, but instead just let this all happen. Many individuals from the Georgia Department of Family and Child Services were terminated, and there was a reform in how their investigations are conducted. They stopped allowing cases to be classified as low importance until a caseworker actually meets with the family. Unfortunately, Emani's case was not the only one that they handled that resulted in a child's death. The fact that Emani was beaten with a rod multiple times, resulting in an arrest, and had various future complaints of abuse, and her case was set to low priority, is just sickening. Hopefully, Emani's death was not in vain, and the reform that took place actually saves the lives of children in the future. As for Emani's half-siblings, they were taken from Tiffany's mother and placed in foster care. Child Services would not let either side of their family have custody of them, and they were later on adopted by their foster parents. The older of the two, who was 3 at the time of Emani's murder and attempted disposal, did bring some things up indicating that they unfortunately remembered some of the situation with Emani. And that's going to do it for today. I hope you enjoyed hearing the story as much as I enjoyed telling it. If you haven't already and you did enjoy the story, like, love, and make sure to check out the previous stories I have posted. Also, if you enjoyed this story or any others I have, subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a future installment. Feel free to share with anyone who enjoys less than well-known dark reality stories, and leave a comment or let me know if there are any stories that you would personally like me to research and cover. We're going to do a little shout out to Pain Therapy, previously known as Asphyxiating Art, who does all of my logos and designs. She's an artist, an aspiring tattoo artist who's available to do logos and tattoo designs. So if you like what you see, I can make sure to get you connected with the artist, and that way you can get the design of your dreams. Have a great weekend.